I live in a small town nobody's ever heard of. Written by BenfromMallard. Mallard, Kansas. That's the name of the city on my birth certificate. This is a place that Google isn't going to locate. To my new knowledge, this place is somewhere beneath Shawnee County. But just where, I can't specify exactly. Mallard is a small town hidden by a wooded barrier of thick trees, broken only by a small stream that flows into a vast clearing. Growing up, we never had any form of modern technology. No TV, no phone, no video games, not even cars or any kind of transportation other than by foot. We did, however, have dull, warmly lit light bulbs, not unlike small campfires hidden in larger glass bulbs. They were spread across the entire town and on its walkways. The buildings were all generic wood and mortar structures with minimal electricity. There were no roads, just dirt paths that led to each building, and one near the town's edge that led to the small stream inlet. We were always told as kids to never under any circumstances go down that path, and that it was for adults only. Sometimes a fate-tempting few would head down there only for the police to drag them back by their ears the other way. Other than that, life was good. We had the typical library, restaurants, a police station, hospital, everything that you could ever need. Everyone knew each other with our 250-person population. All friends were family, and all family were friends. Sometimes a visitor would pop in claiming that they were just exploring the forest and didn't know that we existed. That's how little people know of Mallard, Kansas. I suppose how I felt living in this small area is the same way that we feel as kids living in the same house for years before starting school. Yeah, you knew there was an outside world, and sometimes your mom would take you out with her, but you didn't know what was out there. The only difference is that we never went out of this area at all. They wouldn't let us leave. They said that the great and horrible monsters of the forest were going to kill us. That being said, my going to school for the first day was probably the most free I ever felt in my entire childhood. It was a warm August day, but one of those August days where you can feel that it was going to get cold, but the temperature didn't show. The trees were green, yet held a rich, deep hue. The winds did hold a slight chill, and so despite it being a good 75 degrees, I wore a jacket. The jacket was light gray and had the letters TOPEKA engraven on it. It was a name brand at the time. Usually, we would just get a bunch of these products when a new shipment would come back from one of the town leaders. They would leave via the forbidden stream on a small raft with a large barrel every day, and return before the sun came down over the trees with a barrel filled with clothes, prepackaged food, the occasional toy, and other things that we could not make ourselves. They would usually sell these items in a shop called Barnes Novelties. It was run by the same town leaders who used the funds to help build new houses or repair existing ones. Anyway, I skipped along the dirt road while kicking the occasional rock, and I picked up cool ones, putting them into my pockets. My mom strolled along behind me, holding my backpack and lunch. She didn't need to move faster than a walk because, despite my energy, every marathon that I ran, my mom moved in a single step. As we walked further along, we came across another kid and his mom. He had shaggy blonde hair and the typical missing front tooth we were all starting to get into. He stared at me with his rich brown eyes in absolute awe. Our moms knew each other, so they began to chat, which prompted the kid to run over to me, grabbing me by the sleeves. "Is that a Topeka jacket?" he said with sheer amazement. "Yeah, it's a birthday present my mom gave me. Isn't it cool?" I replied. "Yeah," he said. He jumped up and down, cupping his hands over his mouth at the sight of something so luxurious. He ran over to his mom, tugging her arm down to his level, and pointed at my jacket, shouting a few combinations of, "Isn't it cool? And can I get one?" Both our moms sighed, then chuckled, and we went on our way to school. But now the kid and I were kicking rocks back and forth to each other. "What's your name?" the kid asked. "Ben," I said. "Cool, I'm Jake. We live by the library. You should come over sometime." "Yeah, maybe after school. Hey, Mom, can I go?" I asked her. She smiled. "Sure," she said. "Yeah!" I exclaimed. After 10 more minutes of walking with a few breaks between of picking up rocks and flowers, we finally arrived at the school. The building was small but cozy. There were finger-painted portraits on the walls, streamers with the alphabet lining the ceiling, and a thick, smudgy window which you couldn't see out of, but the sun was still able to penetrate, giving the whole room an orange hue. As we made our way to our desk, the wooden floors beneath us creaked, much to the annoyance of the girls in the class. We sat next to each other and shared our rock findings with one another before class started. When class started, there were no bells, no intercom, or anything that could make noise. Just the teacher up at the front trying to get our attention. She introduced herself as Miss Rosemary, told us her favorite color was blue, and that one interesting thing about her is that she liked to bake. One by one, everyone stood up and began to introduce themselves in a similar manner. "My name is Blake, my favorite color is orange, and, I like playing with my stick collection," said one boy. "My name is Lucy, I'm 11 years old, I like pink, and I like to play with my younger brother," said a little girl. "I'm Alex, I'm 7, blue is cool, and I like to play hopscotch," said another. Then there was one that caught our attention. Not just ours, but the teacher as well. "My name's Rudy, I'm 8, my favorite color is blue, and I like to ride my bike." He sat back down, like what he said was normal. But before the next kid could stand up and start speaking, Lucy from before raised her hand. "Miss Rosemary, what's a bike?" Miss Rosemary paused, but not before she glared at Rudy. "A bike is a toy," she responded. "A toy? What kind of toy?" Blake chimed. Before Miss Rosemary could answer, Rudy quickly jumped up to explain his mysterious object. It's like a wagon, but it only has 2 wheels and you can ride it by yourself." "You can ride it by yourself?" Blake shouted. "Yeah, like a scooter." "What's a scooter?" Blake asked. Miss Rosemary stomped her foot on the ground, causing the whole room to shake a little. "Enough, Rudy. To the corner, now." "But Rudy started whimpering. "Now," Miss Rosemary barked. In tears, Rudy went to the back corner, closer to the big smudged window. He sat down, folded his arms, and put his teary head in his lap. The entire class looked back at him with pity. We didn't know why he was put in the corner, but we all kept quiet in fear of enduring the same punishment. "All right, let's continue," Miss Rosemary smiled. The tone of her voice made it sound like nothing had happened, but none of us could really move on that quickly. Regardless, we continued. My new friend from that morning stood up and started his introduction. "I'm Jake, I'm 7, I like yellow, and my mom's red pie," he said. "Red pie?" Miss Rosemary questioned. "What's in the pie?" "I don't know, it's like these little balls and red sauce. We got it in this one jar from Barnes' shop." "Oh, I think you mean cherry," she answered sweetly. "Cherry, yeah, I think that's what it was," Jake said. When Jake sat down, he looked over to me, signaling that it was now my turn. I'm Ben. I like red, I'm 8, and I like writing and drawing, I said. That's great to hear. You should be ready for our first assignment, Miss Rosemary cheered. Class, I want you to get out a piece of paper and write what you did when you got to school this morning. The class was mixed between ages to help keep the classroom full, so some of us knew how to write. But for me and some other kids, we had no idea what to do. Some kids furiously wrote in their small notebooks until their lead broke, while others just sat at their desk looking down at the floor, trying to make out pictures from the wood. Jake turned to me and threw his pencil at me. Ow, dude, I whispered. Sorry, he whispered back. What is it? I asked. I don't know, I was bored, he said, shrugging his shoulders. So? Well, I was thinking. About what? About that bike thing. Okay, and? I said, getting annoyed. It just seems cool. I want to know more about it. Well, we could just go ask him about it, I told him. Just then, Miss Rosemary looked in our direction and saw us talking. Are you boys done? She questioned. No, we just don't know what to write about, Jake responded. So you think that by talking to each other, you'll be able to write quicker? Exactly, Jake said. I wasn't serious, Miss Rosemary said. Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Rosemary, Jake said, looking contrite. With that, she seemed satisfied and we continued writing. But not before Jake whispered one more thing. Psst, let's invite him to hang out with us. We went on with our paper after that, and in about an hour, we had to turn them in. While we did, other kids began chatting about what they had written, while the other half scrambled their way to finishing their last few sentences before turning it in. Jake and I took the opportunity to go over and talk with Rudy, who was still in the corner. At this point, his tears were dried, but the streaks were still visible from the trails the tears had carved through the dirt on his face. He looked up at us through his shaggy red hair with confusion. Then he put his head back down. Hey there, I'm Jake, Jake announced. Hi. What's the matter? I got in trouble, Rudy said. Oh, Jake said. There was an awkward pause between this and the silent crying from Rudy. Hey, do you want to hang out with us after school? I asked him. Sure, Rudy said, wiping his tears. Cool, then meet us outside after class, okay? I said. Okay, Rudy agreed. And with that, we walked back to our desk while Rudy stayed in the corner. The teacher then explained that the assignment wasn't for a grade, it was only practice, which was much to the dismay and relief of the class. After that was the basic math, science, and no geography. We had a single map of the town, with the edges of the map displaying odd, demon-looking creatures with the words, "Monsters here." This map wasn't even covered at all, aside from the occasional, "Remember to never go into the forest," from the teacher who pointed at it, making sure that we saw the little monsters. We had lunch in between, which was when Rudy was finally allowed out of the corner and when we invited him to sit with us. Rudy excitedly came over and plopped down right beside us. We sat and chatted for a bit when Rudy brought up the map. You guys have a weird map, he said. What's so weird about it? I said. It's supposed to look like a steak. I only see houses on that one, he said. That's stupid. Why would it look like a steak? I don't know, it just does, he said. Yeah, you're probably just hungry, I told him. No, I'm serious, he exclaimed. We kind of made fun of him for a bit after that, telling him that he probably thinks the pencils are pretzel sticks and that the glue was milk. He really didn't like it, but I'm pretty sure that he knew we were just joking with him. Not long after math, school was let out, and we were heading home. We made sure to bring Rudy along with us. But as soon as we were out the door, a woman was there waiting to pick someone up. This was weird because usually parents don't need to walk with us because of how close we live to each other. "I'm sorry guys, I gotta go," Rudy said, looking down at the dirt. "Wait, I thought you were gonna hang out," Jake whined. "I'm sorry, my mom's here." "Who cares?" Jake said. "My mom does," said Rudy. "Whatever," Jake said, and we turned away. With that, Rudy ran to the woman and they walked off. "That was weird," Jake murmured. Yeah, whatever," I said. "Let's go back to my house," he said. Sure, I agreed. We went along the dirt road, walking past familiar faces, passing the restaurant run by Lucy's family. We passed the police station, and finally we arrived at the library. The building was old, decaying even, and there weren't many books, just the basic how-to cookbooks and how to swim and how to tell time, and a few books explaining the physiology of the monsters that stalk the forest. Each book was maybe a page or two, and it was scribbled out in bad handwriting. There were a few fantasy books, one of which was always checked out by one of the town leaders called World History. It was rumored that it was always returned with a page or two missing. When we walked inside, the building was nearly empty, save for one man in the back and the librarian. The windows were sealed shut, and there were mirrors surrounding the back so that you could see the fiction section from the front. Portraits scattered the room with the typical "read" with a smiley face beneath it. The librarian was at her desk reading a book on basic grammar when I realized that I recognized her. "Mom!" Jake shouted. "Oh, hey there, Jake. How was school?" she asked. "Great. Me and Ben are friends now," he said. She looked at me and smiled. "That's great to hear. Did anything else exciting happen?" "Well, nothing big, just math and stuff," he said. He paused for a moment and gave the universal, "I'm stroking my beard as I'm thinking" gesture. "Well, actually, there was another kid we wanted to invite with us, but he couldn't come." "Why not?" she asked. "I don't know, his mom came to pick him up." "Oh, I see. He got sent to the corner today and we felt bad for him." "Why did he get sent to the corner?" Jake's mom asked. He was trying to tell us about something called a bike. I think that's what it was called." His mom gasped and dropped the book that she was reading. She looked into her eyes with a terror that to this day I won't forget. It was as if someone had killed everyone that she loved right in front of her. "Mom, are you okay?" Jake exclaimed. There was silence. She looked up and down the aisles, probably in search of a distraction, but there was none that she could come up with. "Mom, is something wrong?" Jake said, looking worried. "Jake, never play with that boy again. Ever," she said with an anger and a fear in her face that I still can't forget. Jake's eyes widened. What for?" he said, confused. "Do you understand me? Not ever." "But Mom." "Never," she barked. "Fine," he said, putting his head down. He looked back up at me and then at the books in the back. "Come on, Ben, let's go check out the fantasy books," he said dully. "Jake," his mom said from behind us. Her voice carried a little remorse. "Yeah, Mom? I'm glad that you had a great day." Jake brushed it off, grabbed my hand, and we headed to the back. His mom turned to us with one final glance at her distraught son. Then she continued reading. We headed towards the thickest book in the library, the World History book. It was in today. As we opened it, it told of a great fantasy with wars with big fiery weapons called bombs and of leaders who each went by the first name of King. As we read, a man who had been sitting there for a while was staring at us and our book. He had on a well-kept checkered shirt and a dark scraggly beard. He had a stern look on his face and kept looking up at the fantasy sign. "Excuse me, but isn't this the fantasy section?" he said with a husky voice. "Yeah," Jake exclaimed. "Then why is there a history textbook over here? Biographies, too. Shouldn't this be in the non-fiction area?" "What? That's stupid. These people don't exist," I replied. A wave of confusion washed over his face as he looked at the books. There were books about great men from this land called America who ruled the land like the kings in the world history storybook. One went by the name of George Washington, and he was the first king of America. There was another named Thomas Jefferson. He was a poet for the King of America, who had started a great war with a king from another land bordering them by a small pond. These were the backstories to the characters in the main story. We didn't know exactly who wrote them, but we always assumed that it was one of the town leaders. That's why he would frequently come in and edit the books. "George Washington was the first president of this country," the man said, reading from the back of the book. "He was one of the people that made our country what it is today. Surely you've at least heard of him, right?" Jake and I looked at each other, baffled by what he had just said. The man seemed to have known what was in the book, but he didn't seem to understand that it wasn't real. "Well, yeah, but he wasn't real," I said, confused. "Look, none of these people are real. They're all just stories." This seemed to frustrate the man. He tossed the book back at us and stormed out, muttering something about it being a mistake coming here. Just as confused, we left shortly after this. We said goodbye to Jake's mom, who smiled and waved back at us, and we headed for Lucy's family restaurant. It was getting a bit dark, but not dark enough to see purple or red above the trees, just a shade of yellow and orange. The walk wasn't much longer than the one from earlier leaving school, but it was still long enough for us to be worn out until we sat on the bench in front of the restaurant. The painted white wood of the bench felt smooth against our hands as we pressed them down into it with a creak. It truly was a nice little shop with a cream-white exterior to match the bench, which was surrounded by pinkish-purple roses, gifting us with a pleasant aroma to go along with the scent of freshly baked bread and cake. The windows had small paintings of flowers similar to the ones up front with the words "Lucy's Place" in between. It was no doubt named after our classmate. After sitting there for a while, Lucy came out to say hello. She was carrying a broom with her and a dustpan to clean up the little mess that was left there. She danced as she did with her brown hair swaying back and forth. As she swept, she began to hum along to a tune that we didn't know. She then dumped out what she had just cleaned up and sat down next to us. "How are you guys doing?" she asked. "We're good. We just came back from the library. There was this weirdo there that kept trying to tell us that George Washington was real," Jake replied. "Huh? Oh wait, yeah, I think that was Rudy's dad," she said. "Rudy's dad? Oh man, I'm not supposed to talk to him. My mom's gonna kill me," Jake said, looking alarmed. "Dude, I think she only meant Rudy. He was the one that said the B word, remember?" I added. "I guess it's like anyone who says bike gets in trouble." He made sure to turn around, making sure that no one heard him say the forbidden word. "Shh, don't say that word. Somebody came into our shop today mentioning that word, and my dad got really mad," Lucy said. We looked around and saw no adults, so we kept talking. "But isn't a A bike a toy? Why would it be bad? I questioned. Maybe it's dangerous, like it could hurt someone, Lucy suggested. Or maybe it belonged to George Washington. Jake joked, and we all laughed. Did Rudy's dad also try to tell you guys the stuff in that book was real? Lucy asked. Yeah, and he got mad when we told him that it wasn't. He really believed in that stuff, I said. Well, he came into our shop today and told us that we were all delusional, something like that. I think that's what he said. He kept saying that we were all crazy for some reason, Lucy said. Man, I feel bad for you guys. That must have been awkward, I told her. Lucy looked around again and whispered something into our ears while reaching into her pocket. Yeah, but do you want to know the craziest part? She unfolded her hand, revealing a wadded up green piece of paper. He tried doing something called paying, and he gave us this, she said. We unraveled the paper, and it revealed the face from the history book. It was George Washington. It said that it was official United States currency, and it looked just like the one that was printed in the book. Wait a minute, isn't that $1? Jake said, trembling. Yeah, Lucy confirmed. And it feels different from normal paper, too. Wait, then that means, I thought out loud, is America real? Who knows, Lucy said ominously. But you guys take it. If my dad finds it, he'll burn it, and I'll be so grounded. I looked at Jake and he shook his head, pushing the green paper towards me. I can't take it, man. You remember how angry my mom was when we mentioned the, bike around her. With that, I nodded and slid the paper into my pocket. Okay, but seriously, you guys can't tell anyone, you got it? Lucy said. Yes, Lucy, we both said simultaneously. We all nodded and headed our separate ways. The sky was getting purple now. Jake walked home, not skipping as he usually did, which made me feel all the more isolated. I felt the dollar in my pocket again and again to make sure that it was real. I was carrying a piece of America. If this dollar is real, then so is America. So is George Washington, and the bike, and the fiery weapons, and everything else in that entire book. Everything was real. As I walked to my house, which was a few meters away, the sky changed from purple to black, leaving the moon, the stars, and the lanterns around me to be my only light. I walked inside to be confronted by my parents, who looked worried sick. Ben, where have you been? My dad asked with concern. At the library with Jake, and then we went to hang out at Lucy's place. You didn't happen to be with that Rudy kid, did you? My mom begged. No, he couldn't come with us. Why? I asked. Look, your mother and I don't want you to hang around with him, okay? He's a bad influence on you, my dad said. Why? I questioned him. Well, his family's a little weird. Huh, I said. Ben, they aren't from here. We've never seen them before, or their family in our lives. They just appeared out of nowhere. I don't get it, I said as I began tearing up. My parents exchanged a worried look and then looked back at me. It looked like they were going to say something to me, but as they were going to open their mouths, we heard heavy footsteps from the other room. The door slowly opened, making a loud creak as it revealed a large, burly man. Imagine a lumberjack, complete with red plaid button-up shirt, jeans, a large belt, and a thick, bushy brown beard. That's the best way that I can describe this man that walked through the door. Visibly confused, my parents moved their hands, gesturing to the giant. Ben, you know Jack Barnes, right? He owns Barnes Novelties. He was the one that told us about Rudy and his family," my mom said, introducing us. "Yes, about that. I've come to ask you a few questions, young man," Barnes said sternly. "You see, Rudy's family, for a lack of better words, is delusional. They keep spreading lies and rumors about what's outside the forest, saying things like America is real and there are things like cars and phones. So we want you to tell us exactly what Rudy said during school. The librarian said that he mentioned something like a bike. Was that true?" I froze. I knew that if I told this man the truth, Rudy would be in trouble. But if I didn't tell him the truth, well, the truth would come out eventually, and I would be in trouble with Barnes for covering for Rudy. Well, I think he said something like a bike, but I'm pretty sure that he was just making fun of his parents or something." "So he did mention a bike?" I gulped. "Yeah," I said. "I see," said Barnes. He scratched his alcohol-scented beard, then pulled out a yellow pad and jotted something down before sliding it back into his back pocket. "Thank you, young man. You've helped us more than you can know," he concluded. "Oh, and by the way, I believe his father mentioned something about leaving the town. You do know what happens to people who try to go into the forest, right?" "They die," I replied. "Yes, they do. The monsters in the forest are vicious." He raised his arms to try and make them look like claws. "Some have razor claws and move so fast they can't be seen. But when they attack, they make a loud bang. Others are slow, giant creatures that are hunched over and walk with their hands and feet. When they talk, it sounds like a scream or a yell." With this, Barnes cleared his throat and started heading for the door. He stopped halfway there and looked right down at me. He towered over me and stared into my eyes. I knew that he thought that I was scared by his description of the monsters from the fear in my eyes. He smirked and then left me with one last word of advice. "Just remember, never go into the forest." And so, as odd as he came in, he left. The night was mostly uneventful. We had dinner, talked about our dad with Dad at work and me at school, and then we went to bed. My mom came into my room and tucked me in, kissed my forehead, and wished me a good night, leaving the light off as she left. I couldn't sleep though. I knew that Rudy's family was in trouble. I knew the monsters were going to kill them. Most of all, I knew that I had a piece of America still in my pocket. I shifted in bed from side to side, tossing my pillow from one side to the other. As I was laying in my own sweat, the sounds of crickets chirping rang through my ears. But it wasn't enough to drown out the thoughts racing through my mind. I knew I needed to do something. I got out of bed, and in my chest filled with dusty toys and weathered stuffed animals, I picked up an old blue teddy bear, and in one of the torn holes in the back, I took out my dollar and I shoved it in the hole. It wasn't on me anymore. I was safe. I laid back in my bed, now relaxed. I dozed off with the sounds of the night. I woke up this morning to a loud bang. It was out of nowhere, and it came from the forest. There were no bells, alarms, or anything that makes noises in our town. So this sudden bang seemed to us like a bit of the sky had fallen down. I jolted out of bed, grabbing my jacket and shoes, and I ran outside, still in my pajamas. The entire town seemed to be outside. All of us were looking towards the perimeter for any sight of monsters, but there was none to be found. Among the tumult ran along Rudy, who kept asking anybody around something which I couldn't make out. No one paid him any mind, and he began to be more visibly panicked with each dismissal. Finally, he saw me and sprinted over my direction. "Ben, have you seen my dad anywhere?" "No, why?" I can't find him anywhere." "Where do you think he went?" I asked. "I don't know, but he said he was leaving last night, and now I'm scared," Ben exclaimed, beginning to cry. "Did he go into the forest?" I asked. "Yeah, he said he was going out the way he came in." "Wait, he came in? Why did he leave you and your mom behind?" He said he wanted to get his phone or something. I don't know what it was, but he left without us," Rudy said. Rudy looked around, breathing heavily and crying. He saw the forbidden stream and sprinted towards it, leaving behind all cares of getting caught. "Rudy, wait! Don't go over there!" I screamed. He ignored my warnings and kept on sprinting, and I went after him. He paused before reaching the stream, turned around and saw me close behind him. His face held sheer determination to cross into the forest. He saw my eyes and linked mine with his, beckoning me to come with him. We crossed the stream and headed down it. The further we headed down it, we could smell a faint whiff of something horrible, but indescribable. The smell kept getting worse and worse the more we traveled, and soon we could see a clearing where the trees became further apart. To this day, what I saw there haunts me. It haunts my dreams, my thoughts, and it makes me wish that I never went down the stream. But it was still important for me to see. What lay there in the clearing was a pile of naked corpses, all with holes in their bodies, all of them slowly decaying. And at the top of the pile was Rudy's father, the man that I had seen at the library. He had fresh wounds shaped like holes all over his body. My tears were a combination of a bad reaction to the putrid, rotting smell and the sheer terror before me. I fell to my knees, vomiting and crying, while Rudy just stood there, silent, as if something deep within him must have just snapped. I convulsed in agony for what seemed like an eternity when I heard a deep, familiar voice. It was Jack Barnes. "Ben, Rudy, are you down here?" he said with concern. He stopped and stared at us for a while, then saw the pile. He sat down next to me, disregarding the vomit on my shirt and pajamas. "You see this? This is where the monsters put all of their victims. It's horrible to look at, I know, but we've got to get out of here. If we don't, they'll come back. If you're lucky, they're already satisfied." "But what about Rudy's dad?" "What about Rudy?" I said through tears, and Barnes sighed. "I tried to warn them. They didn't listen." I shook my head. There was still something that didn't make sense. Where did all of these bodies come from? Where did Rudy's family come from? Where is America? Barnes tried to comfort me by resting his hand on my shoulder, but I needed to ask him something. "Mr. Barnes," I said. "Yes, Ben." "Is America real?" I asked. He paused and looked at me in shock and then responded, "Ben, we're in America, but we can't leave this forest. There are monsters here." Then the fumes and dehydration finally got to me and I blacked out. I woke up in my bed. It was just breaking dawn and Mr. Barnes, Mom, Dad, Lucy, and Jake were all there by my bedside. The gleam of the sun against my eyes made them unrecognizable, but as I opened my eyes a bit further, I could make out each of their faces. They all had a look of relief painted on their face. "Oh, thank God he isn't dead," Jake shouted. What's going on? I asked. You hit your head yesterday and didn't get up, Mr. Barnes explained. We're just glad that you're alive. I hit my head, but what about Rudy? Honey, who's Rudy? Mom questioned. What, Mom? You know who he is. His family was weird, remember? They kept bringing up bikes and America. Wow, he must have really hit his head hard, Jake said. The entire room filled with laughter. Let's give him room to recover. Ben, when you get out of bed, I made eggs. I know you love them. So come down whenever you're ready, my dad assured me. After small jokes and clamor, they all left one by one. But there was no way I had made that up. Rudy was real. America was real. The horrid corpses were real. All of it was real. I don't know why they didn't remember any of it. I got up and looked down at the same pajamas I was wearing when I was throwing up. And now they were spotless. So were the same shoes, the shirt, the Topeka jacket. Everything was in the right place, like nothing had ever happened. Maybe it was all a dream. Maybe I did make it all up. However, just as I started to head downstairs, thinking that all of this was just a crazy dream, I remembered something. I ran to my toy chest, dug around, and found my old blue bear. I reached into the back, and I found a green wad of paper with George Washington's face on it. I knew it. America was real.